People are always asking me, what branch should I join? Let me answer that question by comparing branch missions and locations, military occupational specialties, quality of life, operational tempo, and pay. Let's start with branch missions and locations. The mission of the U.S. Navy is to win wars, deter aggression, and maintain freedom of the seas. I don't want to hurt anyone's intelligence, but this requires ships and submarines and aircraft carriers, etc. Yes, there are land-based opportunities for sailors, but for the most part, you are going to be assigned to a vessel that is at sea, or you are going to be stationed on the coast. If you like water and boats and are more of a beach person, then this might be a more natural fit. If you hate the ocean and don't like water, then the Navy probably should not be your first choice. Because the Coast Guard is not part of the Department of Defense, I usually don't include them in my videos, but the same logic applies here. If you are patriotic and you want to serve, but want to stay in the United States and near water, then consider the Coast Guard. The U.S. Marine Corps falls under the Department of the Navy. Their mission is to seize or defend advanced naval bases and/or other land operations to support naval campaigns. Their specialty is doing combined arms, amphibious, and landing force operations. Marines are focused on combat. Every Marine is a rifleman. This is one thing that I really like about the Marine Corps. Marines are tough and in good shape. This goes for the infantrymen to the supply sergeant. Most Marines are stationed either in North Carolina, California, Hawaii, Japan, or the DC area. If you don't want to live in these areas, or if you don't like working to support the landing force or amphibious portion of a naval campaign, then consider another branch. The mission of the U.S. Air Force is to fly, fight, and win in air, space, and cyberspace. Here is a map of Air Force base locations. Let me oversimplify by saying that the Air Force bases are almost always in better locations than Army bases. So if you like airplanes, space, or cyberspace, there is likely an Air Force base near you. The U.S. Army's mission is to deploy, fight, and win our nation's wars. There are Army bases in 25 states, Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, Belgium, Italy, Germany, Japan, and Korea. Army base locations are generally in locations where there is a lot of land for training. This usually does not coincide with booming metropolises where people focus on health, education, and high quality of life. Let's move on to military occupational specialties. Most military occupational specialties or career fields are available in all four branches. For example, you can be in public affairs like in this photograph, or you can be a supply specialist, a military police officer, a computer or signal specialist, a doctor or a lawyer in all four branches. You can fly planes or helicopters in all four branches. But there are a few nuances. Each branch has its collective personality traits and culture. Some of these may appeal to you, some of them may not. I will say that the Navy is very focused on the difference between the ranks. There are separate dining facilities for officers and enlisted. This is a small thing, but something I had a problem with whenever I was talking with my conventional Navy colleagues. On the flip side, the Navy has a lot of unique and rich traditions. Although the Army has some of the best and brightest leaders in the world, they also have a lot of idiots. Every job on the team is important, but in the Air Force, it's all about the pilots. If you are a pilot, then you are number one in the hierarchy. Everyone else is support. The Marines are known for absolute obedience and discipline, so if you are a free thinker, this might not be your first choice. On the other hand, the Marines have great uniforms. Quality of life is subjective. What might be terrible in the eyes of one person could be wonderful in the eyes of another. But in my experience, and I'm sure that most would agree, the worst quality of life is in the Army and the Marines. Better yet is the Navy, and the best quality of life is in the Air Force. Most of the quality of life standards are cultural. For example, if you live in a tent or sleep on the ground as a soldier or a Marine, then you will be happy to have any old building as an office. But if you're used to state-of-the-art technology and work 9 to 5 in an air traffic control tower, then for sure your standard for housing and offices is going to be much higher. Housing allowance is equal for the same pay grade in each branch of the military. But for sure, barracks and lodging facilities are way nicer in the Navy and in the Air Force. I've stayed at Army lodges that were cockroach hotels, and I've stayed at Air Force lodges that were like 5-star hotels. The Army and the Marines generally do physical training or PT every morning, while many of the jobs in the Navy and the Air Force let you do PT on your own. Even as an officer, I had morning formation and mandatory PT for 14 years of my 20-year Army career. I suspect that some airmen never did morning PT after finishing basic training. Truth be told, I loved my service in the Army and would not have enjoyed a career in the Air Force. Nonetheless, the Air Force quality of life is always much higher. Let's move on to operational tempo. I'm going to define op tempo as how often a member of the military is away from his home for training or for a deployment. I could only find outdated op tempo information, so I'm going to summarize based off of what I have observed and experienced over the past 2 decades. I think it is safe to say that the Air Force has the lowest op tempo. Unless you are a pilot or crew member, you are going to spend a lot more time at home than someone in the Army or the Marines. And when the Air Force does deploy, they deploy to an airfield where there is usually higher quality of life and much more infrastructure or life support. The Navy has sea duty and shore duty. If you want to be at sea and travel the world, sea duty is a good opportunity. Even if you are on shore duty, you can be asked to augment a ship's crew for a cruise. The Marines and Army are gone a lot. This is because they have a high op tempo. Marines are notoriously training for deployment or deploying. Conventional Army guys have long deployments, usually not to well-established locations. I know soldiers who did 18-month deployments to combat outposts. Generally, Special Operations Forces have shorter deployments, usually 3 to 6 months. But even I got stuck in Afghanistan for a 10-month rotation during my second tour. Another factor to consider here is the training phase prior to a deployment. Individual augmentees might go to a training facility for a week to get vaccines and mandatory classes, get issued body armor, and zero the optics on their rifle. Other units do 6 months of intense collective training to prepare for deployments. For all practical purposes, you are away from your family and home for that train-up period. And finally, pay. Pay is a relatively easy evaluation criteria because it is the same across the branches. Soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines of the same pay grade and year get the same pay. Bonuses and specialty pays vary based upon your military occupational specialty. So if money is your most important consideration, then you need to speak with somebody in that career field and ask about specialty pays. Although no one joins Special Operations for the money, I will say that Special Operations Forces can make a lot more money than conventional forces when you start adding together jump pay, dive pay, demo pay, language pay, etc. Okay, there you have it, a summary of the major factors you should consider if you're thinking about joining the military. Serving your country has a long and distinguished history. I hope I gave you something to think about and applaud your decision to serve. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and to forward to a friend who needs to know this. Life is a special operation. Are you ready for it?